Thank you for doing this interview with me. I can't, I'm so new to your channel. I'm horrible with names. I can't remember your channel's name.
Michaelcthulhu.
Michaelcthulhu. Okay, I'm sorry.
Cthulhu.
I stutter names. I can't help it.
Cthulhu. C? Can you say K?
K.
Thul.
Thu.
Who?
Who? Okay.
Cthulhu. It's a 1920s. My actual name is Michael Crockwell, but when I went to make a YouTube account a bajillion years ago, Michael Crockwell was taken because that's a common enough name in Ireland. So I also like reading H.P. Lovecraft, and Cthulhu is a monster in the H.P. Lovecraft thing. And so I went just Michael Cthulhu, and that was available, so I took it. Now, luckily, that was actually, except for the example you just gave, that was actually very fortunate because the internet can't spell Crockwell at all. It just gets totally confused. If I said Crockwell and then I asked you to guess where the G was in there, you'd be like, just a G? And yeah, and but Cthulhu, because Cthulhu is a monster from a book, if you start if you get as far as CTH, Google fills in the rest. And Cthulhu is common enough on the internet as just a trope, as a meme, that people find have a way easier time spelling Cthulhu, or the autofill at least has a way easier time spelling Cthulhu than it does spelling Crockwell. So it was an accident, but it turned out to be a useful accident, you know, because that meant that every, you know, and like that, I kept the Michael Cthulhu name across all the platforms, and as well as being like a channel name, it's a name for me, and it's just easy for people to find my stuff that way, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, again, thank you for the interview.
Sure.
I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. I know it's hard. You know, you got a lot of stuff going on. But basically, the first thing I'm pretty sure people would want to know, what got you into making such giant swords? Like, just how did you wind up getting into it?
Well, when I was young, there was a lot of fantasy films from the 80s, so that's what got me into making swords in general. Now, and then, you know, so I grew up liking swords and drawing pictures of swords and wanting swords. And then the PlayStation 1 came out, and then you had a combination of the Final Fantasy 7, the first one, that was the first one that most people in Ireland played, you know, because the other ones weren't released widely in Europe on the NES or whatever it was they came out on. So, you know, Cloud had a big giant sword, and I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. And then I played it was called Soul Blade when I played it, but it's called, all the sequels have been Soul Calibur ever since then. And my favorite character in that, Nightmare, had a big, huge, giant sword. So I've always had a soft spot for these big, huge, gigantic swords. And when I was making them myself, I was making like regular size swords when I was in art college. And I just kept like edging up the size, you know, like just slowly. And then I said, you know, screw it. Because I always, like a lot of people who make swords, I had these fantasies about them being useful. Like, if you know, like this one has got this thing here to guard your hand, and they were very utilitarian. But once I abandoned that, and started seeing them as more as art pieces, like pieces of art, there was just no reason to, you know, make them like small, or, you know, and I preferred making them big just for the look of them. Then in 2007, after I had been making a couple of different giant ones, a guy commissioned me to make the actual Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII. And I said, well, I can't say no to that. So I made it, and it was so huge and ridiculous that, you know, a friend of mine said, oh, we should make a video of you trying to use it and put it up on YouTube. I didn't know what YouTube was at the time, so he explained it to me. And he was the one who filmed it and then uploaded it, you know, because I didn't even have a computer at the time, you know. And yeah, and the internet, it seems like a lot of the tech stuff, like in Ireland we had this great leap forward type thing around the 90s, but like I was totally technologically illiterate up until moving here, like about 2009. I've uploading videos and using social media to keep into contact with people I'm not in front of because I'm now living in a different country and all that stuff. Like I would proudly, it's embarrassing now, but I would proudly have described myself as a technophobe in 2007. But like, you know, that's just stupid, you know?
Yeah.
So I uploaded the video, and then it's just me huffing and puffing and not being able to use this big, huge, giant sword properly. And I started getting messages from loads of random lunatics. And I thought, well, they're obviously just, it's the aberration. Can't be that many of them. But they just wouldn't stop, right? And then, like, I'd never sold anything over the internet, and like, I don't even, like, I wasn't even big on communicating with people through the internet at the start. And I said, I can't remember how it was I decided. It's like, screw it, I'll try, I'll see, does this actually work? And slowly but surely it actually works. Like the whole thing of making these big giant swords for these people I never meet or never see. And then I take them down to like the FedEx office and off they go and I never see them and I get money. And it's like, all of a sudden, I slowly creeped into being like some guy, having an internet business,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it like slowly happened.
Oh yeah, everything takes time, but I gotta say, I admit I'm still kind of new to your channel. I'm still catching up on some videos, but you make some pretty sick swords.
Thank you. If you're new, where did you come across it? If you're new, because I'm always curious, like how people wound up there. Was it just the TV show that led you there, or was it something else?
I was just randomly looking at YouTube videos, and I just typed in giant swords. And
Just because?
yeah,
Okay,
I love swords.
it's good to know that I come on the first thing that comes up when you type in giant swords. That's great. That's good. Because like I'm always suspicious, because like when you Google yourself or to figure out like I wonder what the owl analytics are doing, these days you can't be sure Google's telling you the truth.
Yeah.
You put in your name and you're the first thing that comes up, and you're like, Google, am I really the first thing that comes up?
No, probably not, but...
Yeah.
No, I just happened upon your channel one day, and I started watching your videos, and I just got hooked. The work you did is just...
So it's completely through YouTube. That was your...
Yes.
You found me through YouTube internally. It wasn't any external website or anything.
Nope, just straight through YouTube.
Cool.
But, where do you see yourself in, like, 5 years from now with doing these
I
giant
have
swords?
no idea. Like, I always expect some sort of thing to go wrong. Like it turns out that it's actually, that there are liability issues, or some guy will do something stupid with them. Like, my swords are because of the size of them, like, it's way more likely that people will injure themselves than injure anyone else. But, I keep expecting something to go wrong, and it never does,
Well, when you expect it, it never happens, so...
Yeah, I keep planning on so I don't actually make plans for the future. I keep thinking I'm just getting away with it for the moment.
Yeah, isn't there, like, a special license or special papers you need just to build something that big?
Nah, I mean, people sometimes ask me, especially if I'm shipping them overseas, because in the UK they have a no sword law, but because my ones are gigantic and silly, the sword law doesn't really apply to them, because, well, I send them as pieces of sculpture, so they're classed as sculptures, and the chances of somebody using them in any sort of altercation is so small. I've never had an issue. I haven't had an issue yet. I'm sure there could always be some crazy guy at a customs office who goes nuts, or just like, well, it says here in the book, and it's technically a sword. But I'd say, like, it'd be very hard to, like, look at my things and then decide that they come over the concealed weapons law,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because they ain't.
Well, quick question. What's the current sword you're working on now? Like,
The Dragon Slayer from Berserk. I've made it before, like a bunch of times, but I've never made a build video for it. My new thing that I've only started doing lately is doing the big long videos where I take the sword like through every step. And so the Dragon Slayer is the newest one. And there's a couple of things I want to try with it that I haven't done on previous ones. Like each one, even though I've made it a bunch of times before, each one winds up being a little bit different because either my skill level has gone up, or after I've finished it, I've realized, if I'd done it this other way, it would be even better, or, whatever. There's always something. So this one is now, there's a couple of things I want to do with it that I haven't done before. So even though I have made it before, it won't look exactly like any of those other ones.
Yeah.
So that's the latest thing. It's the Dragon Slayer from Berserk. The Guts. Are you familiar with Berserk, the anime or the manga at all?
Unfortunately, no.
But the only interesting thing about, well, okay, it's very interesting, right? But the thing I find interesting about it is the character in it. Like that manga started back in the it was either the early 90s or the late 80s. But he is the first big giant sword character I can find. Like you know how in anime and stuff, the guy with the big giant sword has just become like a trope. Like there's always, a lot of things just stick one in somewhere. Like there's some guy with a big giant sword, but the guy in Berserk, he's the first one I can find that has like an act like he predates a lot of. He's the first character I could find who's like, this is the character, and his thing is he has a ridiculously, like, that's the core concept of the character is he has a ridiculously huge sword.
It's like 10 times his own size,
and the tell in it, the thing that makes it obvious is they felt a need to explain it in the manga. Like a lot of these animes and mangas now, they just have a guy with a big giant sword, and you're just like, well, that's a guy with a big giant sword because that's just a thing.
Yeah.
But in Berserk, they actually explain it in that he was adopted by a mercenary group when he was a child and given a regular sized sword, and as he aged, he just scaled up.
Ah, okay.
But like I think that's the only thing that ever explained why the person has such a crazy sword. Because like Final Fantasy VII starts, and Cloud Strife has a sword as big as a surfboard, and nobody passes comment. They're just like, oh, there's a guy with a sword.
Well, actually, to be honest, when I first played Final Fantasy, I remember the PlayStation 1. When I first played it, I was kind of curious of why he has a sword that big.
No, you were. But in the game, nobody is.
Oh, in the game, okay.
Yeah, in the game, people are just like, guys with giant swords are just a thing. Whereas, when I had the same thing. When I played it as a kid, that was like the biggest sword guy I had, a guy with, that was the silliest, giantest sword I'd ever seen up until that point.
Yeah.
Like even Conan. Somebody was saying, oh, you make giant swords like what Conan the Barbarian has. Conan the Barbarian has a very reasonable sized sword compared to all of this fucking anime manga stuff,
Yeah, true. But, well, I guess you technically already answered what really got you motivated to make them and make what you do into YouTube videos.
Yeah, I'm not a very serious guy. Like a lot of the other sword channels, they'll stand there and they'll give very long, detailed descriptions about the main thing that a lot of people don't get is the history thing. There's basically two different schools. There's the people who like swords as historical items, and that. I mean, and in fairness, that's at least half of all people who like swords. And then the people who like swords as fictional items, like people who like swords because they read a lot of fantasy or play a lot of video games or whatever, right? And it's two completely different. I think it's two completely different things, but they argue back and forth, And so I would say I'm firmly in the fantasy camp. I like them as fictional object. There's some people who point blank say oh, if the sword's not actually practical in combat, then I'm not interested in it. But from my perspective, okay, I guess it's cool that it's practical in combat, but so is a $20 Walmart machete. If I actually wanted to get into a fight with someone, $20 Walmart machete, I might buy two of them. That's $40. That's really cheap.
There you go.
But there's only so much you can talk about weights and balances and fullers and different types of guards and things before I start to go bored out of my mind. My version of talking about different types of swords is skulls and how many spikes does it have and does it have a crazy engraving on it. Which is all very surface aesthetic stuff that doesn't really relate to how good it is to cutting stuff up.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm interested in,
Oh yeah. So how much does it roughly cost you to make each of these swords?
Cost me to make?
Yes.
Well, what do you mean? If you
the material.
The materials are cheap. The cheapest part of the actual process. Like the main cost is labor, you know, because like it takes me a month. One of the complicated ones would be a solid month of me working, you know, and so it's not that is the main cost, you know, like, and in terms of other things I could be doing, you see that, like, money lost. You see, I'm a welder, right? So I could be making like boring railings for some guys. Yeah, like I live on Martha's Vineyard, right? So if I wanted to charge rich people lots of money to make boring rails for their boats, I could do that till the end of time if I felt like it. So in a way, making these swords costs me a lot of money. But what it gives me in exchange is sanity. You know, because if I was forced to make railings for rich people's boats till the end of time, I would probably blow my brains out, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, the materials are the cheapest component. I don't know, it'll be like $300 worth of materials in a sword, if you include like the abrasives and stuff. And it depends on the sword too, you know, obviously. Oh, yeah. And then, but then, like the largest part is my time dicking around with it.
So just mainly the labor's the biggest part with it. That's the cost.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I lost track of where I was.
No, people say that a lot when they talk to me.
Well, you're a great guy to talk to. You just got this great vibe going for you there.
It's the caffeine.
Caffeine. Unfortunately, I can't drink caffeine. Doesn't sit too well with me. Yeah, it sucks. I know.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah. It's not. It's all artificial. The energy level.
Oh yeah. My roommate. Man, I literally lost track where we were. Okay, I asked you that. I asked you that one. Those two were technically already answered. I think we already went through all the questions. Wow. That was faster than I expected. Well, you know what? You call yourself a welder, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know people call you a blacksmith, but the way I look at it, what you do, it is a kind of a form of blacksmithing, if you look at it right.
No. Yes, technically, any blacksmith from back in the day would murder people, lots of people, to have access to the welder I use. To, like, it would just make his job like a million times easier, right? But people, the reason I'm so adamant to call myself a welder is people get really snobby about the difference between a blacksmith and the welder. Like, I don't know there's any other profession that has like such a level of romance and mythology attached to, like okay, no other job like mine has the same kind of thing. Like, okay, imagine you're a roofer, right, and your job is to put a roof on a house, right?
Yeah. And
okay, so you show up and you put the roof on the house, right? And the guy goes, "Oh, that's a brilliant, you're one of the best thatchers I've ever seen." And the guy goes, "I'm not a thatcher, I'm a roofer." And he's like, "Oh, you're a roofer? Well, I thought you were a thatcher. I take it back. That's a shitty roof you made." And that's what it's like when you're a welder, you know, because everyone assumes you're a like, everyone looks at what you make, and if it looks nice, they assume you're a blacksmith. If it looks utilitarian, they assume you're like a welder fabricator person, right? And I know so many people who are welder fabricators that pretend to be blacksmiths just because of that snobbiness people have. Like, I mean, I don't fault them for it, because people are willing to pay more money, like, when they think you're a blacksmith. But guaranteed, most blacksmiths nowadays use welders for the parts that are really hard to do, and they do blacksmithy stuff, you know. But like, you know, when something is too difficult to do, that's when you pull out the welders and angle grinders and all the modern tools. But people do get really snobby about I thought I was looking at a piece of art, but it turns out I'm just looking at a pile of crap because it was made by a welder, you know?
Well, you know, that's true, but I still look at it as a form of blacksmithing and welding at the same time, because You do
Yeah,
basically use traits from both of them and put them into one, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm using like the two things grew out of each other, you know. But I don't like the snobbiness that goes around with, you know, like this whole like, well, there's no other profession. Like it's like, you know, like if you it's like, oh, you're a chemist. I get my chemicals mixed up by an alchemist. They're better, you know. Like it's just
it's understandable. People can be snotty at some things, and some things they won't be snotty. It all society these days, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, and I mean, it's like everything. Like, and also people feel like you're lying to them. Like if I don't explain, like there are people who come to my shop or whatever, right? And then when they see all the modern tools, just because they weren't paying attention, right? They assumed I was a blacksmith, and then you can see them get taken aback when they learn that I use electricity, when I use Tesla's fantastic alternating current to achieve my ends, you know? Like they get they get all like, oh, I thought you used traditional methods. And it was like, well, no, I mean, and I put it this way to people, right? Like the things I make, a lot of the things I make, there is no like if you want a sword made, you go to like a swordsmith and you get like a regular sized sword. But some of the crazy ones I make, the way I make them is the only way to make them, you know?
Yeah.
Like they would not exist other than the fact that I use all these modern tools, you know? That's why I prefer to call myself a blacksmith. Or no, a welder. I don't like. Sorry, I get so angry. I'm losing the track of what I'm saying.
It's okay. We can always just edit that part out if you want. No problem.
I'll leave it in. Fuck it. I don't care.
Oh, there you go, folks. You heard it. He said, "Fuck it. You don't care." Start on them comments.
Unless someone snips that part, just that part out, puts it on a loop, 10-hour loop, 10 hours of Michaelcthulhu saying he's a blacksmith.
With a nice, good background bass going to it. I can actually see that happening. Light bulb.
Well, you see, if it appears on your channel, I'll sick my fan base on you. Okay, go! Shred this guy into oblivion.
And, hey, I could always just ship it over to my roommate and he can upload it to his channel.
Yeah, I guess. He might, if he's not too into it, he wouldn't mind his channel getting destroyed.
Yeah. He knows that I'm doing this interview. He's still up probably listening through my door right now. He says that scythe you made, the three-bladed one, I haven't seen that one yet, so I don't know the name of it. He absolutely loves that, and he wishes he could go over there right now and just take it.
Well, a lot of the things I make, right, I don't, I still have that one, because the person it could commission, it's funny, I actually made two of those at the same time. I have had two of them, right, and one of them went to the person it was for, and the other one, the someone who I won't name, and there's no need to name, never finished paying for it, right? So, unless they finish paying for it, you know, it's sitting here, and if somebody had money, and blah, blah.
Well, how much does it usually cost for you to build someone like one of these swords? Like, how much do you usually charge for it?
Well, it depends on, like, they fluctuate, because there's no relationship to reality, really. They can go up to any price at all. Like, and I don't actually want to talk about prices in this video because my prices are going up the whole time as I realize that this isn't a hobby. This is an actual job that I do, and like, and every so often I realize, geez, I really have to charge more for these things. And if I tell you the prices that they are now, this video goes up onto YouTube and exists forever, right? And then in 7 years' time, some guy might watch this and then send me an email and go, oh, I saw in this 7-year-old video you said you made swords for $500. And so, like, can I have a sword for $500? And I'll go, well, no, because that's a 7-year-old video and they're definitely not $500. And, oh, by the way, $500, that was me purposely saying a stupidly low number. Yeah, they're not $500, guys.
That's just
yeah, but like, so that's why I don't want because I did an interview ages ago, right? And I was quoting stupidly low prices in the interview, and I still get emails. People find that interview, like it was just like a written thing, not a video thing, and people ask like, "Oh, can I really get a so and so for blah blah blah?" And then they get annoyed. They get annoyed that I'm more expensive nowadays.
Well, that's society nowadays, though. You know?
Yeah. So, but I don't want to.
Is,
So I don't want to mention prices.
I respect that. I'm
expensive. Expensive. Don't come to me if you think you're going to get a bargain. I did get a ridiculous email off a kid one day, and I always remember it because it was so ridiculous. Where he was on some crappy website and he saw a sword for $40, and he said in the email, "Oh, I saw the sword for $40, so I was wondering, like, could you make one for cheaper?" It's like,
it's $40.
No. Oh my god! I feel like charging you $40 for reading this email. You know.
You gotta love some people. They just make you want to laugh and rage out.
But anyway, that's the kind of stuff I have to deal with. So I don't like leaving a list of prices. If you want to know the price for something, email me. And the only constant is, if you're like, no, I'll wait, I'll buy that sword in 5 years, I'll be more expensive in 5 years' time, because I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Okay, so, now, again, to recap, he said $500 as an example. He didn't mean that's how much they cost, just so people know. That's not how much he charges. It's an example.
And just to let you know, there's nothing I make that you'd get for $500, right? That's just an example of how it could go so badly wrong.
Yeah, well, as long as we got that cleared up so no one's probably watching this, go over to your channel and be like, "Hey, could you make this one?" No, I'm just clearing that up. But, no, thank you for doing this interview, though.
Sure.
Appreciate it. You know, I appreciate you taking the time. I do have one question, though. What is that a homemade mask that you wear when you're
It's modified, right? There's a thing called a restorator. I have a video about it on my channel called That Thing Around His Neck, my neck. And so the one you buy, it's most of the thing. It comes down and into your mouth like a snorkel.
Yeah.
But when you buy it, because I must be a particularly drooly, spitty person, because I found like it was just fountains of fucking drool and muck. So I stuck the thing on, clink, clink, and then because it just looked like a big pile of random plastic crap I glued together, because that's what it was, I spray painted it, right? So that's why it looks more homemade, I guess, than it would otherwise. But yeah, it's a modified one. I did a couple of other things with it, like the nose clip fell off, so I made my own nose clip, and the plastic stem on the back broke, so I made a leather stem to go across the back. And so yeah, a lot of the parts have been, it's like the ship of Theseus, you know, like they stop it and they replace a board here, and they replace like an oar here, and they replace the main the mast. It's like how far does it go before you say that it's just a completely different boat, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for this. Appreciate it. I know you've been taking a lot of time. You've been busy, and I know you're probably tired right now, and you probably want to go get some Z's, right? So. Tell
truth, I downloaded an emulator. I never actually played the first Legend of Zelda, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm probably going to go back to that.
Well, I'm sorry I took you away from Zelda. Zelda's a great game. I love that. Zelda.
Yeah, I mean, I find the first one, I never played the first one. It's like, oh yeah. That said, though, without the map, like, I started playing it, and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing? And then I downloaded the map, and once you have the map, like, I don't know, did it come with the map when you bought it? I never had the Legend of Zelda. But yeah, once you have the map, it's quite an enjoyable game.
Oh yeah.
Like, because you're like, oh, how do I get to that place? And blah, 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 blah. Anyway,